I'm Leanne Sutherland. I'm the director of the International Land Use Study Centre at the James Hutton Institute up in Aberdeen, Scotland. I'm co-lead of the Land Use for Net Zero Hub.
Hi, I'm Heiko Balzter. I'm professor of physical geography at the University of Leicester, and I lead an institute called Institute for Environmental Futures. I'm also a member of the National Centre for Earth Observation, and I'm a co-lead of the Land Use for Net Zero Hub.
In a lot of ways, land use is pretty much what it says on the tin. It is the way land is used. So it is anything that happens on land, whether that's growing crops or trees or recreation or housing. So there's quite a broad range of things that are encompassed within that category. Heiko?
You're quite right, and I think the important thing about land use is that quite often there are multiple different land uses on the same piece of land. So one thing to be mindful of is that when we see an agricultural landscape, for example, there might be public footpaths crossing, there might be people walking their dogs. All those are different forms of using the same plot of land. And therefore, landscapes are inherently multifunctional. They deliver multiple different benefits to people. They deliver the crops, they deliver food that we eat, they deliver facilities for recreation, and they deliver a whole range of benefits to people. Well, agriculture and forestry and other land use in the UK greenhouse gas account at the moment is a source of greenhouse gases, so it contributes to global warming and the climate crisis. And of course, we want to get the land use sector and agriculture into a balance with nature. So we want to make it into a sink of carbon ideally, but at least make it carbon neutral in order to help solve the climate crisis. So there are multiple different ways in which we can do this. And in principle, land use could make a positive contribution to helping solve the climate crisis rather than contributing to it.
Land is one of our biggest resources, and it's everywhere around us. And so it is already acting as a carbon sink. It's already sequestering carbon, just not to the degree that it could be. And as Heiko says, it's already producing a lot of benefits for society in terms of how we live. And it's those trade-offs and negotiating what we can afford and what we prioritize that make land use quite tricky. Land is also a really emotive subject. People own land, and sometimes they've owned it for generations back through their families. And so this sense of ownership and control and pride in how they manage their land is well established in British culture. And so it's really important as we go forward that we take those private landowners with us at the same time as recognizing that the land that they own is providing benefits to everyone. Everyone needs clean air. Everyone needs places where they can go for recreation. Everyone wants to see the beautiful highlands. Well, maybe not everyone, but you know what I mean? There are an incredible range of benefits coming from this land that is held by actually a fairly small number of people. So figuring out how to kind of square that circle and enable farmers and other land managers to make viable business decisions and have that confidence going forward at the same time as providing all of these other things for the people who are users of that land is one of the biggest challenges we face. So I'm not entirely convinced it is behind. I think it's all about where you draw the line. I mean, farms have been sequestering carbon, as I've said, and have been providing multiple benefits for a long, long time. So to say that we're behind, I think is to question just how you value different industries. One of the particular challenges with land is that pretty much everything happens on land. There are a few things happen on the sea, but all of these industries and what they're doing, it's how you kind of cut that pie in terms of who's responsible for what and what constitutes sequestration or is allocated to particular sectors. So to be honest, I don't think we're behind. I do think, though, that farmers have a reputation for being resistant to change. And I see it more as a form of path dependency. These are multi-generational family holdings, by and large, and they want to be passing their land on in good heart to the next generation. It is extremely difficult in our post-Brexit environment to actually know what those decisions can be. So what is the successful way forward for their land? And so I think for that reason, we've seen farmers in particular taking a step back and kind of waiting to see how the cards are going to play out before they push forward, because they want to have the confidence for their families and the generations to come.
Yeah, I fully concur with you there, Leanne. I think the issue with land use is, first of all, I don't believe it's behind actually in comparison to other sectors, but land use and agriculture are systems that are a lot more complex than maybe some technological emission sources of carbon and greenhouse gases. And that is because if we burn a ton of coal, we know how much carbon that emits to the atmosphere. It's a very easy system, and we can replace that with another source of energy, so we know how much emission we are saving. In a natural system, we are dealing with complex soil systems with different carbon contents, different amounts of organic matter, different microbiological communities living in the soil, different types of species of plants and animals living in that ecosystem, and different land use practices being applied in the farming. So different tillage, different sowing dates, different crop rotations, all the rest of it. And of course, we have the weather variability impacting on everything. So the greenhouse gas fluxes from agriculture are incredibly complex in comparison to, say, a factory, where you know how much is going in and what's coming out. So maybe that is where part of the difficulty lies. And so what the LUNZ Hub is working on, amongst other things, is actually identifying what is achievable, how much we can bring the emissions down, how much we can encourage actually taking carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it in natural systems. Yeah, so the Land Use for Net Zero Hub actually also looks at nature and people, and we need to be mindful that, of course, the different policies on the environment in the UK all are connected, and we can only succeed in our environmental ambitions in the UK if we are treating the environment in a holistic way. So systems thinking is really important in achieving all the policy objectives on the environment. Where the Land Use for Net Zero Hub is actually coming into the scene is as part of a major investment by the UK Research and Innovation in collaboration with different government departments and the devolved administrations. And it is coordinating a large program of about £24 million investment that brings together research evidence and carries out new research and translates that into policy relevant evidence that is then feeding into the decision-making processes, both in Westminster and in the devolved administrations, to inform their climate action planning. So what we do is basically we are trying to synthesize the information that's out there, connect researchers to policymakers at a time when the evidence is needed in the policy domain to try and accelerate the journey towards net zero in a way that also benefits plant species and nature conservation and the way people are using the landscape, both in terms of economic benefits and livelihoods of rural communities and farmers, but also the other forms of land uses that we talked about, like recreational uses and other forms.
For me, there's two key things, and Heiko's touched on them already, that the LUNZ Hub brings to the table. The first is critical mass. So we are 34 organizations. We do have a wide variety of expertise, and we really feel that this is what's needed to move us forward in terms of meeting our net zero and other targets. The challenge that policymakers face, frankly, is that they need to be reelected every 5 years. And there are some really unpopular decisions in some areas at least, that need to be taken if we're going to meet these different targets. It does not help if your scientific community in particular is promoting 14 different things. We need a unified voice saying, this is the way forward, this is what we want to do, this is what needs to happen, and it will work, to give them the confidence to make these decisions that need to happen. And I think that's where the LUNZ Hub is particularly well placed. It has been terrific, really encouraging for me to see just how much policy involvement we have. Quite often as scientists, we feel like we've got the way forward, but we're just not really sure who to tell or how to communicate it. We have policymakers directly embedded with our consortium activities who are really keenly interested to find out, what do we want to do? What do we need to do? How can we meet these targets? So I'm really optimistic that we're actually going to be able to make an appreciable difference in evidence-based decision-making. That's what the LUNZ Hub will bring, is the confidence amongst policymakers that we have the evidence that they need to make good decisions to move forward.